I finally have one in my hands, Samsung's 980 Pro Gen 4 NVMe SSD. In fact, it's their first Gen 4 SSD you can go and buy, and honestly, it's not quite as mind-blowing as I guess I hoped it would be. In fact, it's bested by Sabrent's Rocket 4 Plus in almost every regard. So let's take a look at those benchmarks and its use cases and all that sort of stuff and see if we can work out if this is worth picking up for, well, any reason at all. With that said, if you're interested in seeing more videos like this one on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday basis, then hit that subscribe button and the bell notification icon. First things first, let's run you through the specs of this drive. Now, it's all of the varying capacities, the 250 gig, the 500 gig, which is the one I have, the 1 terabyte, and the soon-to-be-released 2 terabyte drives, all are based on Samsung's own LPIS controller. All of these drives have pretty impressive speed ratings, with the 1 terabyte being currently the fastest at 7 gigabytes per second in reads and 5 gigabytes per second in writes. The 500 gig model I have drops a slight bit of performance on reads down to 6.9 gigabytes per second, with the same 5 gigabytes per second in writes. Although the 250 gig model, which I would argue is probably too small for a Gen 4 drive anyway, drops a lot of performance. You still get incredibly impressive 6.4 gigabytes per second in reads, but the writes are just 2.7 gigabytes per second, which is almost half that of the 1 terabyte and 500 gig drives. Now, all of the varying sizes have Ddr4 cache on board, which is basically the number or the size of the drive in megabytes. So the 250 gig model has 256 meg of cache, the 500 has 512 meg, and the 1 terabyte has 1 gigabyte, and the soon-to-be released 2 terabyte should have 2. Otherwise, that is the majority of the specs. Let's take a look at the benchmark results and see how well it actually performs. Now, bear in mind that all of the performance numbers you're about to see are based on my 500 gigabyte drive, and if you had the 1 terabyte, or I assume soon to be the 2 terabyte drive, you might get slightly better performance, and there'll be a few different characteristics that will change a little bit about how it performs, as we'll talk about in a second, but in the grand scheme of things, this should be a fairly representative sample. Either way, taking a look at Crystal Diskmark, especially on the top end numbers, it reaches pretty close to its quoted figures. In fact, it's about 100 megabytes per second off on both, with about 6.8 gigabytes per second in reads and about 4.9 gigabytes per second in writes, which is close enough. The thing is though, if you look at the ATTO numbers, that's not quite as impressive. It maxes out at 4.5 gigabytes per second in writes and 6.3 gigabytes per second in reads with a queue depth of 4, which isn't quite as good as they claimed it to be, and in an SSD, again, it also doesn't get all that close. Comparing the drive to the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus, the new Phison E18 based drive, this one outperforms it in almost every regard. Taking a look at the graph of the ATTO results, which includes both the Sabrent Rocket 4, the original one, and the Rocket 4 Plus, and the Samsung 970 EVO Plus for a reasonable Gen 3 drive for comparison, you can see that the Rocket 4 Plus beats it in pretty much every regard. The 980 Pro's read results are basically matched with the write results of the Rocket 4 Plus, and the writes for the 980 Pro pretty much match the original Rocket 4. That's a very big difference, and even if we zoom in to the lower half of the graph, there is a slight improvement. The 980 Pro does have the slight edge in these smaller block sizes, but it's not by that much. Now, if we have a look at Crystal Diskmark, there is a slight advantage in the QDepth1 and Thread 1 workloads and sequential workloads, where the 980 Pro does have more consistent results. It's about 700 megabytes per second in both reads and writes over the new Rocket 4 Plus, but that's only one workload. I also like to run a file duplication test, stressing the controller for both reads and writes simultaneously, duplicating around 90 gigabytes of files on the drive. Now, the result for a good Gen 3 drive is about 1 gigabyte per second. A good original Gen 4 drive, you know, like the original Rocket 4 or the Aorus Gen 4 drive, those are about 1.3 to 1.4 gigabytes per second. And the new Rocket 4 Plus hit 1.6. This 980 Pro was sitting between 1.4 and 1.5, so right in the middle between the newer Gen 4 drives and the original set. And it's got one more trick up its sleeve, and it's not a good one. Samsung are making use of SLC, or single level cell caching, to help get the drive to these incredibly impressive speeds. The problem is that the size of the cache by default is only 4GB for the 500GB drive, with an intelligent turbo write 2.0 capacity of an extra 90GB, meaning once you write 94GB of data, all in one go mind, to the drive, it drops off its performance dramatically. You're talking a quoted 5GB per second in reads, but 1GB per second in writes. And bear in mind, that's down from 5. You're getting a fifth of the speed once you've written that much data, which if you were, say, loading up the drive to be your games drive, especially from another faster drive or whatever else, that can be a bit of a problem. And you can see that with my duplication test. The original file set is around 90GB, so once I copied the first block and started copying the second one, well, it was running at 600 megabytes per second instead of the 1.5 gigabytes per second it was running at for the first set. That's a massive performance drop-off, and the worst bit is that the Sabrent drive, that one didn't lose any performance after writing basically its entire capacity to it, and sadly I'm not done yet. See, when I was benchmarking the 980 Pro and running the synthetic benchmarks, the drive hit 74 degrees Celsius at its peak, which is only 1 degree Celsius lower than the smart thermal throttling temperature, meaning that if it hits 75, it starts cutting performance to try and keep the controller cool. Now, I deliberately didn't run it with a heatsink here because there isn't one included in the box. There's not even one of the sort of metallic heat spreader type stickers. It's just a standard sort of paper plastic sticker. And that is sort of stock performance. And what that means is that if you're getting one of these drives, you will need good airflow over it or a good heatsink to help keep that thermal mass away from the controller, because it will get close to, if not actually thermal throttle. For comparison, the Sabrent drive only hit around 72 degrees Celsius without any heat sinks as well, and in the same conditions. And finally, there's the warranty. The 980 Pro offers a 5-year warranty, as does the Sabrent drive, but much like car warranties where they say it's a 5-year or 100,000 mile warranty, whichever comes first, SSDs have that too. The second metric is called terabytes written and is essentially the metric of how much data you write to the drive over a given amount of time, normally the warranty period. So in the Samsung 980 Pro's case, the 1 terabyte model comes with a 600 terabyte written warranty, so you can write 600 terabytes to the drive before you lose access to your warranty or the warranty is voided. But the thing is that on the Sabrent drive of the same capacity, it's 700 terabytes. And if you go with the 2 terabyte models, then the Samsung one will be 1200 terabytes, but the Sabrent one is 1400. How can a company so large as Samsung and so well versed in the industry and known for their excellent class-leading warranties be beaten by a company that, for all intents and purposes, are just sticking other people's stuff onto a PCB and selling it as their own product? No offense, Sabrent, it's a great drive, but you're not Samsung, you're not designing your own NAND, DRAM and controller, and yet Samsung can't offer, can't match the warranties, let alone beat it. Seems a little strange. I fear what happened here is that Samsung is basically just late to the party. If this drive came out right when all of the original Gen 4 drives came out, along with AMD's Ryzen 3000 series CPUs, this would have been the most impressive, the best drive that you could have got. It would have a commanding lead both in price and in its performance, and everyone else would have been playing catch up. But Samsung wasn't prepared. They didn't have this drive ready, and it took them an extra year to bring this to market, and in that time Phison was able to develop a second Gen 4 controller that is now already rolling out to market and offers better performance almost entirely across the board, and even their partners like Sabrent can offer better warranties than Samsung, and that's a bit of a shame, especially considering that this Sabrent drive is cheaper. The obvious recommendation here is don't buy this. Not because it's a bad drive, it's definitely not, still incredibly impressive, and not because you don't need one, because, well, you definitely don't, but either way, don't buy it because there are already better drives on the market. If you do end up with one of these, you're not going to have a bad time. This is an incredibly impressive drive, and for most use cases, it's perfectly adequate and honestly overkill for the vast majority of people. But if you have the choice, I would buy one of these instead. With that said, those are my thoughts, and I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. Do you think that Samsung is sort of behind the times here and everyone else is now, kind of a bit ahead? Or do you think that Samsung has a better commanding victory here because of the specific results that they still hold out victories for? Feel free to let me know in those comments down below. If you're interested in either of the drives that I've talked about here, I'm going to leave links to them both in the description down below. Those will be Amazon affiliate links that will take you to a local Amazon store where you can see pricing when and where you watch this, because it can and does vary, and hey, there might be a slight chance that the Samsung one will be a little bit cheaper, at least by then. Either way, feel free to check out the rest of the links that are in the description down below as well if you want to support the channel. There's other affiliate links if you're buying from places like Overclockers UK, or there's merch or hoodies or t-shirts like this one, or a load of other cool designs. And there's things like Patreon for access to our Money Men Discord chats, sponsor-free videos, and of course, you support me directly too. Otherwise, there are plenty of other videos over there that you can check out. Maybe check out the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus review that should already be out. And otherwise, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. We'll see you all in the next video.